Good morning, afternoon, or evening. It is Thursday, and today we're kind of introducing critical thinking. While I say this class is broken into three parts, there's really just kind of two separate tests for this class, two separate exams. There's the problem solving exam and the critical thinking exam. And today I'm going to be introducing critical thinking, and then next week we'll kind of start with critical thinking and kind of really getting into some critical thinking concepts, particularly looking specifically at parts of an argument, how an argument is structured, and then eventually, after much practice with kind of understanding structures of arguments and identifying the parts of an argument, going into looking at what weakens in arguments. But we're going to start with kind of introducing the idea of critical thinking today. Before we get started, there's a riddle series that I like to use. It's called Knights and Knaves. There's like 11 or 12 riddles based on these two individuals, the Knights and Knaves. So there's an island with two types of people, the knights who always tell the truth and the knaves who always lie. So the first question, part one, on the island of Knights and Knaves, you are approached by two people. The first one says to you, "We are both knaves." What are they actually? Essentially, which is the knight? So here we have a situation where you're offered a question, and you have to kind of discern based off all the information you have what the solution could potentially be. So we know that knights will always tell the truth; they'll never lie. We know that knaves will always lie. So when the first person comes up to you and says, "We are both knaves," you have to analyze that information. I always think it's a good idea to break these questions into the two people, person A and person B, and then use the information and run through scenarios with that person. So, for example, if I say person A, the one who talks, says, "We are both knaves," if that information is, you have to almost approach it as, what does it mean if he's telling the truth? How does that get you your end result? And then you have to say, well, okay, what if he's lying? How does that get you your end result? So take a second, pause the video here, go through and attempt to solve this. All right, so the solution. So when we look at it and we take the two people and we separate them and everything, you get to the idea that the first person cannot be a knight because knights always tell the truth. So if he were a knight, he would tell you so. I'm a knight. Instead, he says, "We are both knaves." And going through the process, let's say, for example, he is a knave. Well, if he says, "We are both knaves," and he is lying, that means the second person is going to be a knight, because that would make his statement a lie. If they were both knaves, both individuals that were standing there were both knaves, not a knight, then what he was saying is true. Then you could see the paradox it creates. So when we look at this answer and we look at the information and how it kind of comes together, you can kind of figure it out. And again, it's applying those rules. Again, they give you the rules that, one person can always tell the truth, one person can lie, and then going through those rules and applying them to see what the result comes out to be. And you get to the situation where the solution can't be possible because of the rules that are set up in the overall premise. All right, so here's a second question. This is part two. Once again, there is an island with two types of people, the knights who always tell the truth and the knaves who always lie. On the island of Knights and Knaves, you're approached by two people. The first one points to the second and says, "He is a knave." The second one then says, "Neither of us are knaves." So here you have two people talking. So what are they actually? Once again, you have to separate these into two individuals. And I know my head's kind of blocking this, but the PowerPoint's available on the in Schoology as well. You can read through the PowerPoint. So on many of these puzzles, especially the harder ones, you want to assign these people roles. You want to say, person A and person B. And if you try to, and then you give them what they're saying, the statements are saying. Again, you have two people saying something, and then you go through the scenarios again. What if this person's telling the truth? How does that impact both of them? What if this person's lying? How does that impact both of them? So take a second and try to solve it and work through it. All right, so the solution. If you assume the first person, A, is telling the truth, then B is a knave and must be lying. B says neither of us are knaves. But if he is a knave, as A claims, then this is a lie, which checks out. So do you see how that works out? You apply the rule that A is telling the truth, and then you look how it impacts both statements to see if that solution works out. Now let's assume that B is the one telling the truth. He says neither of us are knaves. Then they must both be knights. But A says that B is a knave. So once again, looking at it from the reverse, what he says and applying those rules, you get the solution where, you get the solution as well. So once again, you can kind of confirm it when you have both people talking. So A is a knight and B is a knave based on this scenario. And if we, look at it, these types of questions, and it's really just a way, when I do these little riddles and everything, it's a way for you to kind of start to learn how to work through information and apply rules to the information, and it allows you to kind of sort through it. And this is a skill that we're developing that we can use when we get to problem solving, but we can also use for critical thinking. So those are knights and knaves. The knights and knaves will pop out throughout first quarter. I would say like maybe at least once a week, twice a week, just to kind of depending on what we're doing and, where I feel like I can fit in a knights and knaves discussion or use knights and knaves as as a way to kind of start class. So intro to critical thinking. When we look at critical thinking, the word critical comes from the word critic, which means to judge, discern, or decide. Now, this isn't simply just passing judgment and giving an opinion. We're not talking about, movie critics, and we're not talking about TV critic. We're not talking about that kind of critic. What we are looking at is critical judgment. We're not talking about a statement of preference or taste. Critical judgments must have some basis, which comes from some basis of knowledge. So the idea is that I am offering this information based on a store of knowledge I have, and I'm going to use that to strengthen my criticism or strengthen my judgment or strengthen how I decided this information. Now, when we talk about like this class, and I will talk about how we're going to kind of how how this information fits within the context of the exam throughout the year, but this information goes beyond exam prep because you're going to be asked to do these things throughout high school as well as into college when you kind of work on assignments and you're asked to present an argument, present information. You want to do so properly. So that's what this is going to give you. It's going to give you a set of tools and a basis that you can use in a much broader application. So when we look at like what we do under critical thinking, like what is the main parts of critical thinking? How are you able to pass a critical judgment with support? You do that through analysis, evaluation, and then presenting a further argument, basically presenting the other side. Analysis means identifying the key parts of text and restructuring in a way that fully captures its meaning. So you're going to be presenting an argument and you're going to be asked to, okay, what is this argument's point trying to get across? And actually, are they doing so? Evaluation means judging how successfully a text is. For example, how well does it support its conclusion? Does the information, does the support they have actually support that conclusion? Are they strong enough to convince somebody like, yeah, you know what, that argument they're making, the presentation that, the orange is a better fruit than the apple based on, evidence and all this other stuff. Those are the information that they use to support that. When you wrote your old teach paragraphs where you presented your topic, your thesis, and then you had to give evidence to support that, and then you did a conclusion. That's the same thing. Is that evidence actually good enough to support that thesis? And further argument is self-explanatory. This is where you have an opportunity to give your own response to the question by presenting a case for or against the claims. So, all right. So your first assignment in this, and I'm not expecting you to, have the evaluation because we haven't really talked about it a little bit. But I just want to kind of give you an example of an argument with a pretty well written, argument. So there's an article called that you will get if you're on Schoology and everything. It's the attachment right below this presentation. And what I want you to do is I want you to read the article, Wright Brothers Not First to Fly. And that starts on page 10 if you have a book. But I provided the article, so you'll just read through that. What I want you to do is determine how strongly does the information in the article, meaning that do they actually support their argument well? And they claim that the Wright brothers were not first to fly. That is what they're trying to present. Hey, we believe that the Wright brothers, Orville and Wilbur, were not the first individuals to fly, and this is our evidence for that. And they give you a bunch of information to support that. I want you to answer this information in a paragraph, cite specific evidence from the article. Now, you can answer this individually, or if you can do this with a discussion partner. If you're doing this through Schoology at home, you obviously can answer this individually. How I want you to do so is open up a Word document, type out your reasoning, and then submit it through Schoology. All right, that is it for today. The Wright brothers is your assignment for tonight. Read through it, write your paragraph, explain if it strongly supports the article, cite specific sources or evidence from the article in doing so. Have a wonderful night. Friday we will do riddles, which I will have a relatively short presentation to talk about them, and it'll just be answering the riddles.